Good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to today's live author event with Greenlight Bookstore. My name is Josie. I'm the Events and Marketing Manager here at Greenlight, and I am thrilled to be hosting today's event with Najwa Barakat and Luke Leafgren, presenting the English language debut of Mr. N. They will be in conversation momentarily, so you are all in for a really excellent time. Before I turn things over to them, I just want to say a huge thank you to Najwa, Luke, and the team at And Other Stories for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. We are grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Just a few housekeeping things before we begin. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear our speakers, but they can't see or hear you. There are still a few ways to chat with them, though. The first is in the chat, where you can post your comments and thoughts and appreciation for our authors tonight. At the bottom of your screen, there's also a button that says Q&A. If you have questions specifically for Najwa and Luke, you can ask them there, and we'll get to those later on in the presentation. And importantly, today's featured book, Mr. N, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. I'll post the buy link momentarily, but as a thank you for attending today's event, we're offering 10% off the book. You'll just enter the coupon code GreenlightEvents10 in the discount section at checkout. But now on to the good stuff. Today we are hosting author Najwa Barakat and translator Luke Leafgren. Luke is an assistant dean of Harvard College. He has published 5 translations of Arabic novels and received the 2018 Saif Gobash Banipal Prize for Arabic Literary Translation for his English edition of The President's Gardens. And Najwa Barakat was born in Lebanon in 1961. After receiving a degree in theater at the Fine Arts Institute in Beirut, she moved to Paris and studied cinema. She has hosted cultural programs by Radio France Internationale, the BBC, and Al Jazeera, and is the author of 7 novels, as well as the Arabic translator of Albert Camus' novels. She currently lives in Paris. Today's featured book is a joint achievement by Najwa and Luke, who respectively wrote and translated Mr. N. In a story of misadventures, both comical and tragic, modern-day Beirut is seen through the eyes of a failed writer, the eponymous Mr. N. He has left his comfortable apartment and checked himself into a hotel. At least he thinks. So, without further ado, Najwa and Luke may be reading some from the book. They'll be chatting and then taking some questions from you after that. So please take it away.
Thank you so much, Josie. It's so good to be here. And I want to say how exciting this day is for me. I am meeting Najwa for the first time in person, thanks to Greenlight Books and Zoom. And Najwa, translating your novel, O Salam, that was the second translation I ever made, and that was a little over 10 years ago. That was such an important event in my life because it helped me become introduced to translation, and which has become such an important thing for me. So thank you for entrusting me with the translation now of 3 of your books. I'm so grateful, and it's so nice to meet you.
For me too. Thank you, Luke.
I wonder if we could start by a little reading from the novel, and if you read maybe just a few lines in Arabic, and then I can read a little bit longer in English.
Okay, with pleasure. Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's 10 o'clock in Paris, where I live for the moment. I'm happy to be with you. I'm sorry for my rudimentary English. So I am. I will talk in Arabic or in French, and my dear Luke will translate. So for the lecture, يأتي الأولاد بحسب قصص أمهاتهم عنهم. تحمل الأم ولدها خلافته زادا وترسله في الأرض ممتلئا بنفسه أو ناقصا منقوصا إلى أبده. أخي سائد جاء محمولا برواية أخبرته أنه مميز ومقدر له أن يلمع، وأنه الأذكى والأجمل، وجئت أنا عنوة دون ما رغبة رقما زائدا بعد أن تشبثت ببطنها ورفضت أن أنزل، على عكس أخواتي الثلاث التي تزعم أنها أجهضتهن وهي في شهرها الثاني والثالث. Up to you, Luke.
Thank you. I'll read a few additional sentences. So this is the full page on 83. Children come according to their mother's stories about them. A mother loads her child down with fairy tales, nothing more, and then sends him out into the world, either full and self-sufficient or else lacking and deficient forever. My brother Said was born already bearing a story that told him he was unique and destined to shine, that he was the smartest and most beautiful. I, however, barged my way into life, uninvited, unwanted, the supernumerary son, which perhaps is why I clung so tight to the womb. Just the opposite of my three sisters, whom Thurea claimed miscarried in their second and third months. And whenever anyone worked up the courage to ask her how she was so sure they were female, Thurea would shiver with anger and swear that she was certain of it because of maternal intuition, the same intuition that made her realize even before she saw my face that I wouldn't look like my brother or have any of his virtues. Sometimes, when life feels too much for me, I find myself replaying that moment when the midwife dropped me in Thurea's hands and she discovered that I was a boy. She, who said she wanted to be a girl after Said. I, who think she didn't want anything at all after Said. I picture her look of disappointment, irritation, and grief when she saw me, unplanned, unwanted, and unloved. A moment that I can't remember, of course, but the scene is nevertheless as vivid as if seared into my flesh. I can even see the moment she first looked at me like a thing, some object she had no need for, and for which she could think of no specific use. A tumor working its way into her system and threatening her existence. Yes, Maria treated me as though I were an intruder in her life, and I treated myself as though I were an intruder upon life itself. I am excited now to have some questions for Najwa. And as Najwa said, she will, I'll read the questions in English and Najwa will reply. Maybe we could try Arabic, and I'll do my best to translate for the audience. Maybe my first question, just very basic. Where did this novel come from? When and why did you decide to write it?
أعتقد أني حملت هذه الرواية لوقت طويل جدا، خاصة عندما كنت أنا أيضا ككاتبة قد امتنعت عن الكتابة خلال 15 عام.
So Najwa says that she's been carrying this novel with her for a long time. And in part because she, like Mr. Noon, Mr. N, the character, she is a writer and stopped writing novels for 15 years.
ويعني مثل مستر نون، كما يروي مستر نون عن شعوره حيال الكتابة وشعوره بالنفور وكراهية الكتابة، شعرت أنا من ناحيتي أيضا ككاتبة أن الأدب والكتابة أصبحت شيء يعني فاقد القيمة بعد أن أصبح الجميع يدعون أنهم كتاب، وبعد أن باتت دور النشر تنشر أي منتج وتضع عليه عنوان رواية أو قصة أو شعر.
Mm-hmm. So, like Mr. Noon, Mr. Noon is the Arabic version of Mr. N, so that's why it keeps slipping out. So Mr. N talks about his feelings of writing, feelings of disgust, hatred, feeling that it has no value. And that was something that Najwa describes she also experienced. So there was a long time where she didn't feel there was anything that she wanted to produce.
والشيء الأهم له هو الروايات التي سبقت مستر نون كنت قد تحدثت عن ثيمة العنف والقسوة، ثم وجدت كما سيجد مستر نون في الرواية أن الواقع يسبقه، وأن الواقع يعني يصبح أكثر قسوة وأكثر سوداوية مما يعني تمكن خياله أن يتصوره.
Mm-hmm. So the earlier novels, a major theme of them is violence and cruelty, violence and cruelty, qaswa. And the reality becomes even more violent. The world becomes even more violent than imagination. So that becomes a challenge in writing. Is that?
and يعني لابد لكاتب خاصة في المناطق التي نعيش فيها نحن، يعني أتحدث عن لبنان، أتحدث عن فلسطين، أتحدث عن العراق، عن ليبيا، عن مصر، عن سوريا. هذه بلدان لابد أن يواجه الكاتب فيها أسئلة شائكة ومعقدة من نوع ما هي وظيفة الأدب وما هي أهميته حين يعني يسقط الناس أمام أعيننا، حين يموت الأطفال بدون سبب إلى آخره.
Mm-hmm. So, especially in the region where Najwa lives, and writers in that region, in Lebanon, Palestine, Iraq, Egypt, Syria, there are challenging, complicated questions that writers have to face about what is the role of the author and what does it mean to be an author when you see children dying for no reason, for instance.
And what is how you say يعني is literature is useful, really useful when يعني لما الإنسان يفقد قيمته شو بيضل؟ هل بتضل الأدب له قيمة، له دور، له معنى؟
What is the role of literature? What is its value? What is it meaning when the individual themselves has no value? Thank you.
من هنا جاءت فكرة الرواية.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Najwa, for sharing that. Maybe we'll stay on that theme of the connection, the writer connection that between you as a writer and Mr. N as a writer, and questions of the value of literature and its uses. So in many ways, this book is a novel about writing novels. We see the process of writing, the mechanics of writing. Mr. N writes about himself. He has an audience that he's trying to please. He scatters lines from his earlier novels throughout the city, and he watches people read those lines. We see Mr. N struggle with words, their linguistic form, their meaning, how to connect them in sentences. We see a villain who rises up out of one of Mr. N's earlier novels, which in some ways is also a novel, Najwa, that you wrote 15 years ago, Ya Salam. And so the novel raises all of these questions about literature and about writing, and it raises questions about the power of literature and the uses of fiction. So, Najwa, do you feel that you are raising these questions, or do you also make a statement about the power of literature and the use of literature through this book?
أعتقد أنني بهذه الرواية حاولت استخدام الأدب لمساعدة الأدب.
مساعدة الأدب؟
مساءلة يعني طرح الأسئلة والتساؤل حول معنى الكتابة ومعنى الأدب. قد يكون مفيدا يعني أن نختصر البلوت للمستمعين أو للمشاهدين.
Sure. So Nedra says that she's raising questions, and suggests that as a summary of the plot, I might say that the basic plot is there's a writer, Mr. N, who lives in a fancy hotel because the construction of a skyscraper in his neighborhood is driving him crazy. But we gradually learn that he might, this might not be the full story, that Mr. N has suffered some kind of psychosis, some kind of mental illness, and he's confined in some type of institution or an asylum. And then, along the way, a character from one of this author's own books shows up in real life in the city of Beirut, and then we have a mystery. The mystery, Mr. N has to solve this mystery of who this person is, and that person is not a nice person. So it's a very unpleasant, it's a scary event. That's the basic plot, and yet the novel is so much more than about the plot. There are so many themes and ideas and questions. In addition to the question about the use of fiction and literature, what are some of the other themes that were most important to you as you were writing this novel, Najwa?
الموضوع المهم جدا هو كان لقائي مرة أخرى ببيروت وبلبنان، والرواية محاولة لوصف هذا المكان الذي أصبح يعني مكانا universal، يعني يشبه في العالم أمكنة عديدة أخرى.
So, one question about returning to Lebanon and thinking about a place that has become, in some ways, a universal place.
Yeah. لأنه بيروت بالفترة اللي أنا عم أوصفها فيها وبالمنطقة اللي اخترت أن أحكي عنها هي نوع من المكب البشري. المكب يعني المكان اللي ترمي فيه النفايات، ولكن بيروت بالمنطقة اللي أنا تحدثت عنها هي مكب للناس مش مكب للنفايات، لأنه مستر نون سيتحرك في منطقة تجمع نازحين من الحروب، عمالة أجنبية رخيصة، وناس تركوا قراهم ونزلوا لكي يبحثوا عن لقمة العيش. فإذا نحن في منطقة قد تجدها في المكسيك، يعني هذا المجتمع الذي حاولت أن أصفه قد يكون في أي مكان في العالم. والعالم حاليا مع العولمة مع الحداثة أصبح أصبح يتضمن مناطق كثيرة مشابهة. هناك الديكور الجميل في المدن الكبرى، وهناك خلفية الديكور يعني الكواليس، محل ما بيعيشوا الكومبارس، محل ما بيعيشوا الخدم، محل ما بيعيشوا الناس يعني اللي داني دو لا تير، الملعونين تبع الأرض.
So, Beirut is a kind of maybe a crucible of humanity. People come there from everywhere for all kinds of reasons. Some refugees of war, some to find work, some.
Cheap welcomes, yeah.
And in that way, because so many people are coming here, in some ways it could be representative. It's similar to other places. It could be anywhere in the world, because this is happening all over. There are other places as well where people are gathering and coming together, so many different parts of society and humanity. But you also focus, it seems very important that Beirut is the place that you chose and write about. And Beirut plays an important part in the novel. It's not just the background for the action, but it's almost a living character, as important and as contradictory as Mr. N. We see through this novel, we see the history, parts of this history of the city, its geography, its neighborhoods. We see what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it smells like. We see, as you were describing, all the different nationalities, all the different professions and socioeconomic classes. And Mr. N is sometimes repelled and sometimes fascinated by the city. Um, what does it mean to write about Beirut itself as someone who knows so much about that place?
مستر آن ينتمي إلى هذا المكان لكنه لا يعرفه، يعني سوف يترك منطقته بالأشرفية، وهي منطقة يعني نسبيا يعني منطقة جميلة مرتاحة ماديا، لينزل إلى بطن هذه المدينة، حيث سيكتشف أن إحدى شخصياته وهو لقمان بطل الرواية السابقة التي هي يا سلام، سوف يكتشف أن هذا البطل الذي قتله في رواية سابقة وهو مجرم وقاتل، وكان خلال الحرب الأهلية يقوم بتفجير الأماكن وتعذيب الناس، سوف يكتشف أنه رغم أنه قتله في رواية سابقة ما زال حيا. وأنا أردت أن أقول في هذه الرواية أننا نحن اللبنانيين، ولسنا فقط اللبنانيين، أعني أهل هذه المنطقة، رغم كل الحروب التي عشناها لم نتعلم مما حصل، وأن السلام الذي افترضنا أنه جاء إلى لبنان ليس سلاما حقيقيا، بل هو سلام مصطنع.
Okay. So the important thing about Mr. N is that he belongs to Beirut. He lives there. That's where he's from, but he doesn't know. He doesn't know that place. He doesn't know about it. So he lives in a very beautiful neighborhood, an upscale neighborhood. But then an event he needs a part to repair his toilet, and he goes to a different part of the city entirely. And as he is exploring and seeing all these different things, that's where he discovers Lukeman, the character from the previous novel that Mr. N wrote. And in that previous novel, Lukeman is killed. Mr. N, Lukeman is a murderer. He was a militiaman in the Civil War, and a truly terrible person. And the author kills off this character. And so now he sees that Lukeman is still alive. And one of the things that this means, or what Najwa is pointing out, is that Lebanese people must not forget what happened. That even though it's painful, if I'm understanding correctly, Najwa, that we must, preserve those terrible events in our memory in some way, because what came afterwards was not a real peace. There was a certain, end to the fighting, but it's not a real stable peace that Beirut and Lebanon experienced afterwards.
تماما، والبرهان انه البلد حاليا يعني منهار على جميع المستويات، لانه الحرب يعني لم تنتهي كما يجب، ولان اللبنانيين يعني ما عملوا ميا كلبة، ما سوف مستر نون يعني سوف يصطدم بأحد الشخصيات اللي خلقها برواية سابقة، هذه الشخصية سوف تطارده، لأنه بدنا يعني عم بحاول مستر نون بروايته، أو أنا أقول إنه بالأخير الشر يعني the evil ما انتهى ولم يمت وما زال مستمر، وأعتقد إنه من أهم الأسئلة اللي بيطرحها الأدب هو فكرة الشر. إنه شو فينا نعمل حياة للشر؟ الشر قصدي يعني الحرب، الحروب، الشر يعني موت الأطفال، الشر يعني هو يكون في دومينيشن لناس عندها مصاري وفلوس على ناس فقراء وما عندهم إمكانيات إلى آخره.
So the proof is that at all different levels, the problems that are occurring, that the evil continues, and the question of evil is the most important question that literature can pose. Literature forces upon us this question. With wars and the death of children, the way poverty, the way people with money oppress people who don't have it.
يعني السؤال هيدا بيعذب، يعني بيعذب مستر نون إلى حد كبير. هو يعذب إجمالا الكتاب بشكل عام. إنه لما نتذكر إنه دوستويفسكي مثلا قال إنه لو ما في الله كان ما في حدود للهرب، يعني للفظاعة البشرية. لما تكون عشت حرب أهلية ثم كنت شاهد على حروب بالمنطقة، ما فيك تهرب من هذا السؤال. Why?
Najwa gives the example of Dostoevsky and the question of if there is no God, then what are the limits? And that's similar to the Civil War forcing the question, why is all this happening?
Yeah.
Right. One of my questions was going to be whether you had a favorite part of writing this novel or a most exciting part, but we've just been describing or talking about some of the very painful themes of this novel that come from the painful realities of life. At the same time, what was the experience of writing this? And were there parts that you especially enjoyed or were excited about getting?
يمكن أهم، يعني بعتبر أهم شيء بهذه الرواية هو أني حاولت أشتغل على 3 مستويات بالسرد، 3 يعني level narrative level، بين الماضي العميق القديم يعني طفولة مستر نون، الماضي تبع مستر نون ككاتب، وحاضره البريزنت تبعه اليوم. واشتغلت على هال3 مستويات بشكل مش تراتبي، يعني فايتين ببعض. وحبيت انه لما ينتهي القارئ من قراءة الرواية يحس انه لازم يرجع لها بشكل خلفي، يعني ابنيها كل مرة يقول انه مفكر حاله عايش باوتيل، او نو منه باوتيل، مفكر انه هيدا كان بالماضي، لا مفكر انه هيدي الشخصية حقيقية، ما بنعرف، يمكن مش حقيقية، يمكن كل شيء عم يحصل بداخل رأس مستر نون. فحبيت يكون في هيك لعبة تشويق، وخاصة بعد الانتهاء من القراءة لا ينتهي القارئ من الكتاب، انه يضطر يرجع يعيده براسه. ما بعرف اذا نجحت بهالشيء، بس هيدا كان رهاني.
Okay. So Najwa was saying that one of the things that she enjoyed was how the narrative is structured on several different levels. There's the distant past when Mr. N is a child. There's his past as a writer, and then there's his present. And they're not structured in any kind of linear way, but they're all blended together and interwoven. And so Najwa hopes that when the reader finishes the novel, that readers will feel a need to return, maybe reread it, or when they finish reading it, they're not actually done reading it because it still plays, it continues in their head as they sort out the details of the story and try to understand what's going on in the mind of Mr. N. I like that. That's maybe I can say one of the pleasures of translating a novel, because in the translation process, I make a rough draft, and then I go back and make that feel a little bit more like English, because there's still a lot of the traces of Arabic syntax or just things that we wouldn't say in English. And so I have to make a different draft, and then go back and work with the Arabic and go through it again to resolve questions that I have or problems, or make lists of questions that I send to Najwa. And then, it's a process of continually editing and revising. And so that was a delightful part of translating the novel, continually going back and reading and rereading and trying to put it together. And one of the challenges was using tenses. And in the Arabic, it's unclear it's often unclear where we are in that history. We don't know if we're, we don't know if we're in the present, we don't know if we're in the past, we don't know if we're in something that Mr. N is writing about himself. And trying to preserve that ambiguity in English was one of the challenges, but it was also very enjoyable. So I can understand how you must have had a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment inventing this and inventing the story and structuring it like that.
بعرف لوك الناس اللي قريوا الرواية بالإنجليش وكتبوا عنها يعني أشاروا قديه ترجمتك يعني استثنائية، وأنا كتير بشكرك لهالشي، وقديه ما بنحس إنه ترجمة. يعني I know كان challenge لإلك، بعرف مش هين أبدا. ف thank you، يعني هاي اوكازيون لقلك ميرسي بكو، لأنه أنا بقرا بالإنجليش وبعرف إذا النص قريب علي ولا لأ، والناس اللي قريوا بالإنجليش كتير يعني they appreciate very much your translation really, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
بدي أضيف شغلة مهمة جدا، هي هيدا التفاوت بالأزمنة، لعبة هل عم نقرأ واقع أم فيكشن، يعني خيال أم واقع إلى آخره. هيدا أعتقد شيء كتير بيميز الكاتب، لأنه الكاتب بشكل عام قد يختلط عليه أحيانا، يعني يضيع هو نفسه بين الأشياء الواقعية، يعني اللي بيشوفها بالواقع، وبين الأشياء اللي هو بيتخيلها. فأنا حاولت أخذ يعني هالميزة هيدا عند الكتاب وضعفتها. يعني مستر نون ما عنده مشاكل نفسية، منه حدا he's not ill mentally ill، ولكن مواجهة هذا الواقع اللي هالقد صعب، انت بعراك you are fighting with the reality always. هالعراك بخليه يعني هالقد صعب اللي عم بيعيشه، انه يوصل لحالة من الجنون الى حد ما. يعني الكاتب كنت عم بحاول اقول انه كل اللي بنقريه خلال الرواية هي الفيجن تبع مستر ان and not يعني exactly the reality. It is his vision of the reality.
Najwa, was talking about how writers, the process is not capturing reality, but I didn't catch it all, but struggling to find reality or capture their experience of reality. I'm afraid I can't do a very good job of explaining that.
يا رح حاول وضح. يعني مستر نون لما بيكون عم يوصف أشياء في شيء كتير حساس عند الكاتب. انت وعم بتراقب الواقع لما تكتبه عبر رؤيتك انت، مش هو وصفه الحقيقي مثل ما هو. يعني منه فوتوغرافر الروائي. نوفلست يعني طريقة نقله للواقع هي طريقته هو برؤية الواقع، مش على طول هو الواقع كما يراه. واحيانا هالشي بيضخم الاشياء. في خط رفيع جدا بين المخيلة واللاوعي وبين الواقع والوعي. بالرواية أنا ضخمت هالعلاقة. مشان هيك بيختلط الأمر على مستر نون. ما بنعرف إذا اللي عم بيشوفه اللي شافه بالمقهى هو لقمان حقيقة ولا هو عم يتخيل إنه هذا لقمان.
So when a writer describes reality, there's it's not always clear whether it's it's not the thing. It's not the thing itself. It's not a photograph. It's their vision of reality, which also mixes with the unconscious, and there are different elements that are coming together. And in the case of Mr. N, it's not always, that's part of what we're seeing. It's not clear whether Lukeman, the villain, is the imagination or actually present in reality. I have one more question, and then maybe we could see if there are any questions from the audience. Maybe two more questions. The Image of Lazarus is what the novel opens with. So the Lazarus story from the Gospel of John, of Jesus resurrecting a friend of his who's been dead for several days. And the book, this book, Najwa, raises the question of, what does Lazarus think about that? Is Lazarus happy to be resurrected, or upset, angry, disappointed? And did he record that experience? Surely Lazarus must have written about it. He must have told somebody about it. But what happened to that account? Where have we lost that? And what might Lazarus say? And what was your reason for using the character of Lazarus and the symbol in your novel?
Because لأنه بالنسبة إلي توقف كاتب عن الكتابة هو أشبه بالموت. ولكن العودة I will let you to translate.
Okay. For a writer, to stop writing is a kind of death. And so then to return.
Yeah. So إذا عم يرجع، يعني إذا في أعجوبة وعم بترده للكتابة مرة أخرى، مش هالشي هو عبارة عن مخاض وعذاب. يعني عملية الخلق عملية جميلة جدا. الإبداع والخلق شيء جميل جدا، ولكنه بنفس الوقت نار. يعني نار محرقة وعذاب وأسئلة. فكانت يعني فكرة اليعازر، يا ريت بتقرا لوك المقطع اللي بيحكي فيه معاه، انه بيقول له ليه رديتني؟ كنت ميت ومرتاح. حبيت اعمل هالانالوجي بين الاثنين.
So I'll only translate in brief, but creation is a very beautiful thing, and it's a wonderful thing, but it's also very maybe painful, or it's difficult. It's a kind of fire, and so in death, in the symbolic death, there's a type of contentment and a challenge in coming back as well.
Could you read
The very
Yeah.
first page.
yeah?
Okay. So this is the very first passage in the novel. Our beloved Lazarus has gone to sleep, yet I will go and wake him. Why, O Lord? Have I done something to displease you? Lazarus whispered in the darkness. Apprehensive, the Messiah rolled away the stone, called to Lazarus, and waited. After only a few seconds, Lazarus emerged, blinded by the blaze of light that struck his eyes. When they started unwinding his white wrappings, he realized that the miracle had actually been performed. He had fallen sick, and the illness became so severe that death had come as a mercy, carrying him off to a place without any pain or suffering. He spent 4 days there in non-existence. He had been sleeping, and then he had been awakened, secure, and then disturbed, floating in the beyond, and then the Messiah arrived and brought him out. Why, O Lord? Have I done something to displease you?
Beautiful, thank you. كتير حلو اسمع الانتوناسيون بالانجلي.
Uh-huh.
So beautiful, thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Najwa. One last question. Do you have any current projects that you're working on, either another novel or other things?
Yeah, I'm trying now to. I'm preparing a new novel. Not trying to. عم بشتغل على مشروع جديد. عم بيشتغل براسي. بعد ما بديت بالكتابة. I hope رح يكون عندي وقت. I hope رح يضل عندي desire. يعني الفكرة أوقات بتجي وما يعني ما بيكون وقتها. So yeah, I'm working on a new novel.
Okay, working on a new novel, and it's going through your mind and thinking about it and processing it, preparing to write, and you
صح
hope.
لأنه أوقات ممكن ياخد يعني أشهر طويلة قبل ما ابدأ بعملية الكتابة ككتابة. يعني هيك بيتخمر بقرا أوقات حول الموضوع بحاول يعني بترك هيك الفكرة تتخمر إلى أن أحس إنه صارت جاهزة للكتابة.
The process of working through it, thinking through it, that can last for months before a person is ready to start writing.
Sometimes some years, like Mr.
Sometimes years.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if there are any questions, feel free to. I don't see any at the moment, but we'll give a few moments if anybody in the audience has questions.
No, Mama, not yet.
All right.
Mother is asking.
All right. Well, maybe we can wrap up a little bit early, but this has been such a lovely time together, Najwa. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you for Greenlight book. Thank you, Luke. I'm happy finally I met with you. Inshallah, قريبا we will have another occasion to
Inshallah.
discuss together. Thank you so much, Josie.
Yes, and I want to add my thank you to Josie and Greenlight and to everybody at AOS, and also about the thank you to Jeremy Davies, who believed in this novel and worked with me and made so many fantastic suggestions as the editor. And so, I like to say that 97% of the words of this book or this translation are mine, but the best 3% came from Jeremy. So I can't thank him enough.
Hello to Jeremy too. Yeah, of course.
We did get one question in the Q&A, so maybe we can include that if you have time still, Najwa. And the question is about how has the book been received in Arabic? And would you like to say anything about reception in Arabic? And I know it's also been translated into French, so that would be another.
Yeah. كان الاستقبال كتير كويس بالعربي، وانت بتعرف هالشي لوك، لانه كتير انكتب عنه، كتير انحكى عنه بشكل يعني ايجابي. يعني بعضهم لليوم بيعتبروا انه يعني بكذا موقع، بكذا مقالة، بكذا كريتيك، بيعتبروه من افضل الكتب يعني طلعت بالخمس سنوات الاخيرة. الترجمة الفرنسية كمان كانت كتير جيدة. الكتاب ترشح لجوائز يعني باللغة الفرنسية، وصل للائحة قصيرة للشورت ليست تبع بري دو لا ليتراتور عرب، ووصل لشورت ليست تبع فيمينا اترانجي، بري فيمينا اترانجي، وهيدي جوائز يعني جائزة فيمينا جائزة مهمة جدا، قليل ما في كتب عربي ترشحت الحقيقة لهالجائزة، فاستقباله جيد. هلا أنا متحمسة كتير أعرف كيف راح يكون استقباله باليو اس اي وإنجلند، يعني عند القراء اللي بيقروا بالإنجليش.
So it had a very good reception both in Arabic and in French, and critics writing about it, and articles being articles and interviews, and then also being shortlisted for 2 prizes for the French translation. So it's very exciting. So maybe just say at the end, congratulations, Najwa, on this book, and thank you once again for the privilege to be able to translate it.
Thank you, thank you everybody.
Congratulations to both of you. And I just like to say thank you one more time, Najwa and Luke, for your time today, for this really wonderful conversation. I'll plug one more time. You can buy the book on our website at greenlightbookstore.com, and I've dropped the link in the chat. But hopefully we can all chat again soon. And again, congratulations.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.